The promise. Mary stood in the dimly lit room, the weight of the promise her husband had extracted from her pressing on her chest like an anchor. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty without Jack. He had been taken from her suddenly, leaving a gaping hole in her life, and with that hole, the heavy burden of a secret. She turned her eyes to the dark sky outside the window, watching the rain fall in thick sheets, feeling an unsettling chill creeping through the room. It had been 3 months since Jack had passed, and yet every day felt like a lifetime. Every step she took in their home felt like walking through a memory, every corner filled with reminders of the life they had built together. But now, it was all different. There was a dark cloud looming over her, something that Jack had left behind, something that, if revealed, could tear apart everything they had ever known. Mary, thinking to herself, why did he make me promise? Why couldn't he have just told me everything? What was so important that I had to carry this burden alone? She could still hear his voice, soft but urgent. The night he made her swear to keep the secret. It was his final request, his dying wish. No one can know, Mary. Not even you. Trust me. You'll understand one day. Keep this secret, and everything will make sense. Mary had agreed, of course. What else could she do in that moment? Standing beside his bed as he breathed his last breath. She had vowed to keep it safe, to protect him even after he was gone. But now, months later, the secret was eating away at her. She had no idea what it meant, why it had been so crucial to Jack's final days, or how it would affect her. All she knew was that her life, their life, was built on a lie she couldn't reveal. The envelope she found in Jack's office was the only clue she had left, sealed with a wax emblem she didn't recognize. It sat untouched on the desk for days. She had tried to ignore it, tried to push it aside, but now it called to her, louder than ever. With shaky hands, she picked it up, the wax seal cold and smooth beneath her fingers. Mary, whispering, what if this is it? What if this is what he was hiding? With a deep breath, she tore the seal, the crack echoing through the silence of the room. She unfolded the letter, her heart racing as she read the words written in Jack's familiar handwriting. The more she read, the heavier her chest became. This wasn't just a simple will or a letter of love. No, this was something far darker. Jack's letter, in her memory. Mary, if you are reading this, then you found the truth. You are the only one I can trust with this. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I never wanted you to know the things I've done. But now, it's up to you. You must decide who you are going to protect. Me or the truth. Mary's hands shook as she continued reading. Jack had been involved in something deep, something dangerous. Names, dates, and events she couldn't comprehend were written in black and white. As she read, she realized with a sickening certainty that Jack had been leading a double life, one that she never knew about. The man she had loved, the man who had promised her forever, had been involved in criminal activities that reached farther than she could have imagined. Mary, gasping, how could he keep this from me? The letter went on to reveal details about dangerous people, organizations, and illicit dealings that Jack had been a part of. There was mention of an enemy, a powerful figure that had threatened Jack's life, someone who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And now it seemed that danger was coming for her. Unraveling secrets. Mary sat back in a chair, staring at the letter in her hands. The room felt colder now, as if the air had thickened, pressing in on her. The weight of Jack's words suffocated her, each one carrying more weight than the last. How had she not known? How had he hidden this from her all these years? The letter spoke of a hidden vault, a place where Jack had kept all the evidence, documents, files, photographs, that could expose everything. A vault she didn't even know existed. She had spent years in this house, trusting Jack, believing in their life together, and now it all felt like a lie. The person she had loved so deeply had been hiding a darker, dangerous side of himself, a side she could never have imagined. Mary, whispering, "A vault! Jack, what were you involved in?" She knew she couldn't sit still any longer. There was no turning back now. The truth was out, and it was her responsibility to uncover it. She had promised Jack she would keep his secret, but now she had to know everything. She couldn't ignore the warning any longer. The letter had said the vault was hidden in a location she would never suspect, an old storage facility, long forgotten, with a security system so complex that only Jack could access it. But the real shock came when she read the final line. Jack's letter, continuing, "Mary, the people I've been protecting you from are now after you. They know what I've left behind. They're coming for the vault, and if they get their hands on it, it will destroy everything. You are the key. You are the only one who can stop them. Mary," in disbelief, "they're coming for me?" Her heart raced. The danger wasn't just something Jack had hidden in the past. It was now a present threat. Whoever these people were, they were watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. And Mary realized with a sinking feeling that she was already in too deep. She knew that the safest thing to do would be to walk away, to leave this letter untouched and never look back. But she couldn't. The letter, the secret, it was already a part of her. If Jack had trusted her with this, if he had made her promise to keep the truth safe, then she had to follow through. There was no turning back. As the rain continued to fall outside, Mary gathered her resolve. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to find the vault, whatever it took. She stood up, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the next steps would change everything. Her world, the quiet life she had once known, was already gone. In its place was a dangerous game, and she was the unwilling player. Into the unknown, Mary's mind raced as she drove through the empty streets, her thoughts swirling like the rain hitting the windshield. Every turn she made felt like a step deeper into a world she hadn't known existed, into a life she never signed up for. Jack had always been her safe harbor, her protector. Now, he was the one who had unknowingly thrust her into this nightmare. The storage facility was a long drive away, located on the outskirts of town, tucked away behind overgrown trees and a forgotten road that was barely visible in the dark. It was the kind of place that didn't look like it belonged in this quiet, sleepy town. It felt wrong. The moment she turned onto the road that led to the facility, her unease grew. There were no lights, no signs of life. Just an empty expanse of land and the creeping feeling that she wasn't alone. Mary, thinking to herself, what if they're already here? What if they know I'm coming? The letter had warned her. The people Jack had been trying to protect her from were out there, and they were relentless. Mary had no idea who they were or how deep they were involved, but she knew one thing for certain. They wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. And what they wanted was in that vault. The facility was an old warehouse, weathered by time and neglect. The steel doors were rusted, and the locks looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Mary pulled up to the entrance, her heart thundering in her chest. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she was making a mistake. But then she remembered Jack's last words. How important it was that she kept the secret safe, how the vault held the answers to everything. There was no going back. She parked her car and stepped out into the damp night, the cold air biting at her skin. The wind howled as she walked towards the door, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She reached for the keys Jack had left for her hands trembling as she inserted the key into the lock. The sound of the lock turning echoed in the darkness, and the door creaked open slowly. Inside, the warehouse was vast and eerily quiet. The only sounds were the distant hum of machinery and the faint sound of dripping water. Mary's eyes scanned the room, looking for any sign of movement, but there was nothing. It felt abandoned, forgotten, a place no one would dare venture into. But Mary knew better. She knew that this was the calm before the storm. She moved deeper into the warehouse, her footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. Her breath was shallow, her pulse quickening with every step. She felt as if someone was watching her, following her every move, but when she looked around, there was no one. The shadows seemed to stretch and grow, twisting in the dim light. The deeper she went, the more the feeling of unease settled in her bones. At the far end of the warehouse, she found it, a large, rusted metal door, just as described in Jack's letter. There was a keypad next to it, and Mary's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what the code was. She had no idea how to open it, but she wasn't giving up. Not now. Mary, muttering to herself, think. What would Jack have done? She remembered something, a number Jack had mentioned in passing. She didn't know if it was the right one, but it was worth a shot. She punched the numbers into the keypad, holding her breath as the machine hummed and clicked. The door didn't open immediately, but then with a screech of old hinges, it began to move. The vault was just beyond that door, hidden away in the shadows of the warehouse. As Mary stepped inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was it. The moment that everything would change. The moment the truth would finally come to light. But she wasn't prepared for what she found. The Vault of Truth. As the metal door creaked open, Mary stepped into the vault. The atmosphere inside was thick with dust, and the air was dense with the smell of mildew and old wood. Her eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, and she saw shelves lined with boxes that were filled with papers, files, and old photographs. This was it. This was the place where Jack had hidden everything. But something felt off. The silence in the room was unsettling, almost as if the walls were closing in on her. Mary's fingers brushed over a dusty file, but before she could open it, a sudden noise made her freeze. The sound of footsteps. Someone was here. She spun around, her heart racing in her chest, but the room was empty. The sense of being watched, of danger lurking, intensified. She could feel her breath quicken as she scanned the room. Her mind raced. Was this part of Jack's plan? Had he anticipated this? Or was it a trap? Suddenly, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out, hoping it was a message that would help her make sense of everything. But instead, it was a call, an unknown number. Mary hesitated for only a moment before answering. Mary, nervously, "Hello." The voice on the other end was distorted, robotic, like someone was trying to mask their identity. Unknown caller, gravelly. "Mary, you found the vault. But that's not the real question, is it? The question is, what will you do with it?" Mary's heart skipped a beat. Her mind raced. Was this one of the people Jack had warned her about? Had they been tracking her all along? Mary, demanding, "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice on the other end chuckled softly, the sound sending chills down Mary's spine. Unknown caller, mockingly, "You're asking the wrong question, Mary. You should be asking yourself, can you trust the people who say they want to protect you? You're in too deep now. It's not about who I am. It's about whether you'll make it out alive." The call ended abruptly, leaving Mary standing alone in the vault, her breath shallow. Her grip tightened around the phone as she looked around the dark room, her mind reeling from the cryptic message. She had always known that uncovering the truth would come at a cost, but this was more than she had bargained for. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. Another message. She opened it with trembling hands. Text message. The files are more than just documents. They are the key to stopping everything. But if you reveal them, you'll be making yourself a target. The people who are after you, they will stop at nothing to get what you found. Mary's heart pounded. The pieces were starting to come together, but she didn't know what to believe. Was it too late to turn back? The weight of the secret in her hands now felt heavier than ever. The price of truth. The walls of the vault seemed to close in on Mary as the cryptic message echoed in her mind. She looked down at the piles of documents before her, each one holding a piece of the puzzle she had spent her life trying to avoid. The weight of Jack's secret was now hers to bear, and with it came an even darker reality. Someone or something was hunting her. Her phone buzzed again, jolting her out of her thoughts. This time, there was no distorted voice, just a single sentence in a text message. Text message. "They know you're there. Leave now, or it's too late." Her pulse spiked. She had been so absorbed in the files that she hadn't heard the car pull up outside or the soft clicking of footsteps approaching. The sense of impending danger had been there all along, but now it was tangible, real. They were here, whoever they were. In a frantic rush, she gathered as many files as she could. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she knew she had to leave with something. Her heart pounded as she stuffed the papers into her bag, each second feeling like an eternity. She had to make it out of this place alive. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps grew louder, and a shadow loomed at the entrance of the vault. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. The figure stepped into the room, and Mary's eyes widened. It was a man, tall, dressed in black, and his face was partially obscured by a mask. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The message was clear. He had come for what was in her bag. Mary, backpedaling, stay away from me. The man didn't respond. Instead, he lunged toward her, grabbing the bag from her hands. Mary screamed and fought back, kicking and thrashing, but he was too strong. In a swift motion, he shoved her against the wall, knocking the wind out of her. She gasped for air, her heart racing. She had underestimated how far they would go to get their hands on the documents. This wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a fight for her life. As she struggled to regain her footing, she spotted a metal rod near the ground, discarded from a broken shelf. With every ounce of strength she had left, she lunged for it, grabbing it and swinging it at the man's head. The blow landed with a sickening thud, and he stumbled back, momentarily dazed. This was her chance. She turned and ran, her breath ragged as she bolted for the exit. Her mind raced. She couldn't let him catch her, couldn't let them take the files. She wasn't just running from him now. She was running from everything she thought she knew. The truth had become a weapon, and she was its bearer. As she reached the door, she looked back one last time to see the man recovering and charging after her. She pushed the door open, heart hammering, and sprinted into the night. Her car was still parked outside, a few yards away. She had just a few seconds to make it. As her fingers fumbled to unlock the door, the man's shadow loomed closer. But just as he reached out to grab her, she managed to get the door open and slid inside. She slammed the door shut, locking it as quickly as she could, her hands shaking. Her car roared to life, and she sped off, the warehouse disappearing in her rearview mirror. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't even know if she could trust the documents she had just taken, but she knew one thing for sure. Nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The final truth. Mary's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she sped down the dark, rain-slicked road. Her heart raced, and her mind was in a frenzy, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. She could still hear the sound of the man's footsteps echoing in her mind, and the vision of him lunging at her kept replaying in her head. But there was no time to think about it now. The truth she had uncovered, the truth that had nearly cost her everything, was her only focus. Her phone buzzed in her pocket again, and she reluctantly pulled it out, praying for some kind of reassurance. It was another message, and this time, it was from an unknown contact. Text message. They know you're running, Mary. You're not safe. But the only way out is through. The files you have, they contain more than you think. They're not just papers. They're the key to everything. Mary's chest tightened. She knew she couldn't run forever. The people after her were relentless, and they would never stop until they got their hands on what she had taken. But what did the message mean? The key to everything? What was she supposed to do now? She couldn't go to the police. She couldn't trust anyone. She was alone. But the files, Jack's files, had to hold the answers. They had to. With trembling hands, Mary pulled into a secluded area on the edge of town. She parked her car, turned off the engine, and sat in the silence, staring at the bag of files next to her. The weight of it all felt crushing. The truth she had uncovered had changed everything, but it also made her a target. She reached into the bag and pulled out the top file. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the pages as the light from her car's interior illuminated the words. The more she read, the more her confusion grew. The documents were filled with information about Jack's past, things he had never shared with her. There were names she didn't recognize, dates she couldn't place, and strange references to hidden operations and shadowy figures. But one name stood out: Mark Simmons. Mary's heart skipped a beat. Mark Simmons was Jack's old colleague, someone Jack had warned her about in passing, but she had never given much thought to it. He had been involved in the same covert operations, but Jack had always been vague about the details. What did Mark have to do with all of this? The text message from the unknown caller suddenly clicked into place. It wasn't just about the files. It was about Mark. Mary's mind raced as she remembered a conversation she had overheard months ago, before all of this chaos had started. Jack had been talking to someone on the phone. She hadn't caught much of the conversation, but she remembered hearing the name Mark mentioned several times. That was when she first started to suspect that there were things Jack hadn't told her. Now, she understood. Jack had been protecting her from something much larger, something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. But what would she do now? The files weren't just going to protect her. They were a ticking time bomb. The truth would destroy everything. Suddenly, a car's headlights flashed in the distance, pulling Mary from her thoughts. Someone was approaching. She had no more time. With a final glance at the files, she grabbed the most important document she could find and stuffed it into her jacket. She had to get to Mark. He was the key to everything. She wasn't sure if she could trust him, but it was her only option. The car stopped right behind hers, and the headlights illuminated her face. She didn't know who it was, but she could feel the danger closing in. Mary opened the car door and stepped out, her mind made up. The only way to end this was to face it head on. As she walked towards the unknown car, she could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind her, heavy and deliberate. She turned, but no one was there. And then she realized she wasn't just running from them anymore. She was running towards the truth, no matter the cost.